Welcome back to another episode of the Phazon Labs, powered by World 1-1. This is our brand new show where we give elevator pitches and game ideas for a brand new Metroid game, since Nintendo refuses to let us have one of our very own, official. So we're just going to keep making up our own to keep ourselves happy, entertained, and satiated, so we don't all lose our collective minds. I am, as always, your host, Larry the Bearded Wonder. Joining me, as always, is Isabel Bramman.
Hello.
And back again, we have, from the Omega Metroid Podcast, Dakota Lasky.
Hey, how's it going?
And Andy Spiteri.
Back again. What's up, guys?
So, last episode, we got Andy's pitch for Metroid Splinter Cell. I feel like Samus's helmet should change so that the visor is 3 green circles.
That would be sweet, actually. Yeah, that should totally happen.
I'm down for that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm okay with it. We've just made an addendum to a prior episode. That's a first for us here. But this week, we're putting Dakota Lasky on the spot, and we want to hear what awesome Metroid game is lurking in his brain box. So, Dakota, what you got?
Well, so I was thinking about this one because I had to be strategic about what I was going to pitch here, because I just went in on Andy's idea, so I can't just come out swinging with Metroid Prime Hunters related content, because that's just setting myself up. So I also didn't want to be redundant because he just did Metroid 5, and we know Metroid Prime 4 is coming, so I was like, all right, I'm going to think of something else. So this is something that I've thought about and talked about on Twitter and elsewhere, I think on the show, back on Omega Metroid, a bunch of times. I've always wanted to do a Federation Force remake or another Federation Force game. So this is my pitch for one of those. I always thought, screw the original Federation Force. I always thought what really they should have done was a serious, dark, horror, survival style Federation Force game based on the Marines and Metroid Prime 2. That was just the obvious setup for that, and you use those characters. So that game would follow the crew of the GFMC Task Force Heracles. That game would start off the GFS tire, crash landing on Aether after they were chasing a space pirate frigate. That frigate ended up landing at the Aegon Wastes, but they landed elsewhere. So this game, you'd be following the crew of that ship as they land on Aether, and they would be trying to complete their mission of finding the space pirates and dealing with them, as well as trying to survive at their base on Aether, keeping their base, alive, keeping themselves alive, and hopefully making it out alive in one piece. So a lot of your time, you'd spend half your time going out on missions, looking for the space pirates, looking for resources for your base, looking for resources to survive with, looking for, scanning for information on the planet, and then you'd also be, moving the plot forward. You'd be getting into run-ins with the space pirates, with the Ing, and all that. And then you'd be back at your base, upgrading it, talking to other members of the crew, upgrading your weaponry, working on your armor, working on the base, and then holding off attacks at your base in like a firefight horde style kind of gameplay loop there. So you'd have, the story of the team landing on the planet. You'd go between the two different forces. If you remember from Metroid Prime 2, you'd had Force 1 and Force 2, which are made of 6 Marines each. You'd be I think it'd be really cool if you created a character and you were kind of like, you took some creative liberties here and added like another Marine that you could customize, be your own character that maybe went between the two teams. And you're going out on these exploratory missions. You're also back at the base. You're interacting with the different characters, all these different relationships between them, and creating repertoire with them. Eventually the story would continue as the Marines kind of get whittled down one by one, and the Force 1 and 2 become just one squad. This crew of 24 to 20 people become a crew of half a dozen or less, and eventually maybe they get some information that's crucial to the Federation to kind of give them a little, something to really survive for instead of just making it out alive. And they eventually don't make it out alive. They all end up perishing in the end, but they did something, whether it was to, get some information or stop the pirates or something that was critical that eventually helps the Federation or Samus later that we find out. And the major part of the game would, again, going on those missions, being at the base and interacting with the crew and working on it, and then defending the base. I think it'd be really cool where you'd be able to go on missions off by yourself, which might have some implications socially with the rest of your team, or go on missions with other crew members and potentially risking their lives and working with them. You'd be able to command them or, communicate with them. There could be opportunities for co-op. I also think it'd be really cool to have like severe weather effects. You go out on a mission, a sandstorm runs in, how are you going to get back to the base in time? Can you get back to the base and defend it? Is your base, properly armored for that? Things like that. I think it'd be cool to mix and match different technologies. The Federation, Marines, what they've scavenged around the planet from the Lumina, from the pirates, and trying to survive and have a cool, serious, dramatic horror survival exploratory kind of FPS game that has room for solo gameplay and co-op gameplay, and I guess gives a little more depth to that part of the Metroid Prime story, and also I think salvages and redeems the Federation Force brand a little bit. That's the game I would be. That's the game I would make.
I dig it. I kind of feel like with how we know this ends canonically, this kind of is like the Rogue One chapter for Metroid.
Yeah, this is your Rogue One, your Halo Reach, exactly.
I like that idea a lot, actually. The other thing that was rolling through my head as you were describing it is I'm like, this could make for a really cool like tower defense game.
Yeah, it would be like, that would be a cool like little maybe like mobile spin-off based on this too. But yeah, right? I'm thinking like it would be like, yeah, exactly. It would be kind of like a tower defense game, but you're playing it from the perspective of one of like the units essentially, right? And you're running around the base like trying to keep things fortified and trying to communicate and trying to like take out enemies and all of that. Maybe trying to preserve information that you've scanned and gotten from somewhere, or resources that like the Ing are trying to take it back from you. Because they're, they do that kind of stuff. Yeah, something like that.
So, we're gonna turn over to Andy. Andy, what gets you excited here? What's turning in your brain box when you hear this idea?
Well, first of all, Dak, you did a good job strategizing, because I was ready to poop. I was ready to poop on your Metroid 5 pitch, and I was ready to dump on Metroid Prime Hunters 2. But I like this suggestion, and we've kind of talked a little bit about this before. I actually think that the core game that you described is fantastic. I do really like I think that opens up to different like gameplay modes. Like you can have solo missions, like go and retrieve this or whatever. You can have you could have multiplayer that would make sense, like survive hordes of whatever coming at you, or go and do whatever. I think we talked about the ability to go on like missions, and you can still have, because of Federation Force, you could have like the 4 Marines or whatever. I think that in this one, it would be really cool if like you could switch between them on the fly, and you could do like different objectives and like work together and stuff. The only so I like the core idea. The only thing that I am not actually super crazy on is the setting, and I think and this is my personal preference. Because the Marines of Metroid Prime 2 Echoes make sense to tell that story, but in my mind, I'm just like, I think that I would rather have a different setting with a different crew. Just because we've seen the Ing, we know the Ing, we've been to Aether, we know Aether, we know how that story ends, and you know what, you said it's the Rogue One of the series, and like, that's appealing in some respects. I think if it were me, I would have a new setting, a new planet, a new area. I like to create a character idea, and then you can like build up some of your teammates and squad mates and stuff like that. I just think that I wouldn't want to go back to Aether. I feel like that's a little bit too particular, and then you're kind of like retreading at that point, because it's not like you're setting up for anything in the future, right? Like that threat's already been defeated, and yeah, it would be cool integral, but it's not like I'm gonna live or die on that hill. I think if it were just me, I would put it somewhere else, somewhere unique, somewhere that we haven't been to already. But yeah, other than that, like I really like the idea that they could resuscitate the the Federation Force branding, because the concept was good, but the execution was lacking. So I like that.
I will concede that I would be down for it to be somewhere else. Like that would be cool. You know, I was thinking like, and I didn't mention this in my original pitch, but I was like, one of the thoughts that would be really cool is like when you go to the Sanctuary Fortress in Metroid Prime 2, you see that big city like below, but you don't ever go to it. So like I think it'd be really cool if like in this game you could go to it. Like you go and explore that city. You got kind of go to places in Aether that you might not have been able to go to as Samus, or you didn't go to as Samus, or you might not have known about. But so that's kind of what I was thinking there too. And because even though like you're right, it's somewhere we've been, I still don't think like there's still some meat on that bone. I still think there's some places you could go, and because it is a familiar place, I think that does kind of gives some impact to it. Like when you play Halo 3 ODST, you're going through New Mombasa and whatever, which is a place you had been in Halo 2 already, but I think that gives it some resonance, it gives it some impact because you've already been there. Now you're experiencing it in a new way. So that's kind of how I was looking at it. But I agree. I think it would be really cool to also do it in a completely different place too, with new characters, new location, and spice it up that way. That would be also really cool.
Yeah, my preference would be somewhere else, but I think that there is validity in that. Like you could go to some areas in Aether that you didn't get to before, and that could open up a lot of new and interesting scenarios as well. So yeah, I wouldn't die on that hill at all necessarily.
No, there's definitely a lot of wide potential in that. Isabel, what gets you hype here? What would you want to see specifically from this idea?
Well, my thoughts are that I like the idea of following like the troopers. My only thing is I would do a completely different gameplay style, and I would do it like the Fire Emblem or XCOM style and do turn-based strategy instead. Which is probably
that's really good. I like that.
Yeah, because I think like the idea of having like different classes of characters and like potentially like being able to customize your party, and you know, and again like that kind of would go back to the tower defense and that kind of stuff, because they do play a little bit with that in those games. I think also in like Advanced Wars too, but not as much as they could. And I think if they do decide to go with kind of more of this turn-based strategy, they could really lean into that. So I do like the idea of having a first-person horror, but I think having a turn-based strategy could make it even better. In my mind, if that makes sense.
I like that. I mean, oh, sorry, Andy. I don't know if you want to.
I was just gonna say, like from like our quote unquote real world perspective, like Nintendo is far better at making those kinds of games than they would be presumably at making a first person horror game. So I could see that actually. I think that sounds cool.
Yeah, I agree.
I feel like
yeah. Sorry, you go.
I feel like collectively we made the Metroid mobile game we didn't know we wanted.
Yeah. Hey.
I would play this on PC if anything, please. But I'm more of a real-time strategy gamer, so like, you know, StarCraft, Age of Empires. I would love to play this in like a real-time strategy game, or you know, Halo Wars is what I'm immediately thinking of, and you could, you know, because for me, like I'm obviously a big FPS gamer, big FPS player, and I kind of like the intimacy of like you're in first person, and you kind of have those like crew interactions and all of that, and the gameplay I think can be a little more intimate. But at the same time, I think you can do a lot of that same stuff in a campaign perspective in a strategy game. I mean, StarCraft, Age of Empires, those games, Warcraft, all do that. So Halo Wars did it phenomenally. So yeah, I would be down for that. I turn-based would also be cool. I'm personally down for real time, but turn-based would also be cool. XCOM, you know, I mean Mario and Rabbids. That's a very recent popular like turn-based strategy game that's doing really well, going into space or whatever. I don't know. I didn't watch the trailer, but I saw the screenshots, and Mario's getting into space in 2021.
Mario's got 2 guns.
He's dual wielding. He's dual wielding out here.
I guess.
I was blown away. My man was out here ready to cap. So yes, I like that idea. That would be really cool. And I've said this to Andy before on the show, but I really think it's important for any franchise, but especially Metroid, to really branch out and do different kinds of games and different styles of games while still retaining that Metroid feel. And I think like strategy makes a lot of sense for Metroid, and this would be perfect for it. So yeah, I'd be down for that too.
So I think we just figured out we need Ubisoft to develop. That's what I'm hearing.
I'd buy that game.
So yeah, I would too. I'm here for it. That's one that I feel like too, especially with the input method available, would have worked great on the 3DS.
Well, that's the thing, is that I think the one problem with, like, Andy is right that Nintendo's better at making like a strategy type of game, like a Fire Emblem type of game, than like a first-person horror. But like, unless it is turn-based, like real-time strategy just feels very difficult on the Switch. I feel like it would have to be turn-based just because of like the console limitations. Whereas I feel like a first-person like adventure or FPS or whatever kind of game would still work pretty well on the Switch, as opposed to like a real-time strategy. Like, it's unfortunate Nintendo doesn't put their games on PC, because I would love it and I would play, you know, a Nintendo RTS with my mouse and keyboard. If they give me the option on my Switch, I would totally do that, but they don't. So I don't want to play a real-time strategy with a dual, like an analog stick. Like, I'm just not gonna do that. I just refuse. So
but there's a solution here. We could totally bust it out and use the Joy-Con movement for your mouse input.
I'm trying to win here, man. I'm trying to win. I'm not trying to just, lose and get bodied.
So I don't know. I feel like it could be. I feel like they could work that fairly well. I've seen Joy-Con movement very competently done, depending on who's doing it.
I have. Have you seen it done for a real-time strategy
on a
game?
Joystick. Ugh. Jeez.
I would never do it. And I mean, even for the first, like, an FPS game that I originally pitched, I would still want to play it on mouse and keyboard, because that is the optimal way to play it. But if it was on Switch, I would at least want to have the dual analog. I still think, for me, like, a big part of the game is the experiencing it through the eyes of the Marines and their story. And the playing it from the strategy perspective, the isometric perspective. Like, sure, you can have the cutscenes you go to from time to time, but the gameplay is still that isometric perspective or whatever, and that kind of gives you that detached feel to it. And with this, I would really want you to be like, you're there, you're living this story as the Marines, you're going through it, and you're going down like they did. And I think it might lose a bit of that if it was you're looking back from God's point of view and be like, I'm playing the strings over here, in this small scale confrontation. Essentially, I think having it, having your perspective on the ground would be really cool.
I can get behind that too. I mean, like I said, I like the idea of, a horde mode style, kind of king of the hill, defend your outpost, just duke it out slugfest with the ing that eventually that Federation troop loses. There's a definitive appeal in that to me as well. So, but I'm just curious. What kind of music do you hear playing when you're envisioning this game?
Music. Oh.
Yeah. It's such an integral part of the series. I mean, you got to talk music somewhere.
If you're on Aether, you can lend yourself pretty easily to some remixes, some higher tempo remixes of wherever you happen to be. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like we can get some better music than Federation Force had. That's for sure.
The bar is very low there. Personally, I would like for them to stay with what Metroid Prime I think really does well, is like the very synth-heavy, like upbeat tempo tracks at times. I think that would be really good for this game. And then when you're going to like the horror and exploratory stuff, that's when you kind of bring it down to like Metroid Fusion. And even like when we were talking about the wrecked ship on Omega Metroid a week or two ago, like the track from that, like those kind of like unharmonic, like ambient, like not necessarily a harmony, like those, like I think it's sticking to what Metroid does best there. Like if I really wanted to say it, I'd be like, give me guitar solos and hard like percussion and all this stuff, but that just going outside of Metroid, and I think would also be tonally really off. So I think what Metroid, like sticking really close to what Metroid Prime 2 did is, I think, music, like where this should, like sound wise, where this should kind of stay. It should really, really be like you are experiencing that Metroid Prime 2 world again, just from a different perspective.
Mm-hmm.
I can dig it.
I like it. So let's. Any final thoughts? Just in case I missed anything from anybody. Anybody got their the need to get out the red pen and go, I want to change this?
Nah.
Yeah, no,
Come on, Andy.
I mean,
come
I
on.
still think
No,
I still
no.
think that the tactics is like the way that I would personally like to play it, but you know, I still think that what Dak is saying with the first person, I think would be really immersive and would be really cool. So, but I'm personally more
I
of
like-
like the turn-based strategy. So,
I think this would work better as like an FPS, and actually, this, which is surprising for me to say because I'm like, I love
Wow.
turn-based strategy, and
Wow. Are we
it's not that I
recording?
don't like FPS, but you know, I think that like such a big part of the appeal to this is like you redeem the brand. You know, like instead of letting this game become a failure and a one-off, you're just like, no, this is a good idea. It can be cool, and you know, it could work. It could work.
mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, exactly. Like I think this is also partly like doing Federation Force over again.
yeah,
I think then after you do this game, then you can open it up to like, oh, you do a Federation Force strategy game too. After that, like that also.
I'll say one thing though. This guy Dak over here, I'm putting it all on the line, giving ideas. He's going to the safe Federation Force remake idea here.
You already,
Shake my head.
you already gave this
my
idea
head.
on the show though. You're not even you just recycled it. At least came out with something new.
I infused some new tidbits in there, like Splinter Cell. That was new.
That was you're right. That was new. That was new.
All right. So it's time to put a pretty bow on this package so that we can address it and mail it off to R&D 1 over at Nintendo. But this bad boy needs a name. Dak, what title is emblazoned across the box art here?
Whew, sheesh. Well, I again agree with Andy that I would be down for this to be, you know, on a new location, new stuff happening. But we're going with the original pitch, them being on, you know, it's Aether Marines and Metroid Prime 2. That's what I would call it. Metroid Prime Aether Marines. That's what I would call it. I think it's just nice, short, like, or concise to the point. Like I think it's nice and clean. It says what it is. I think it sounds cool. And was my first idea, and that's what I wrote down. But I think I would go with Metroid Prime Aether Marines. I think Metroid Prime, really strong brand. For anyone who's played Metroid, you'd immediately know what it's about. And if you haven't played Metroid, I think it is intriguing enough, as well as aside from the Metroid Prime brand, interesting enough to get you involved. And then once you see what it's about, you're like, wow, this game is sick. Obviously, you'd buy it. So that's
Metroid Prime lets you know that it's an FPS too.
exactly that.
Yeah,
also,
that's true.
yeah.
So, and you also don't have this. You can redo Federation Force without calling it Federation Force, but everyone kind of knows that's what it is.
Right.
Can I throw my pitch out there?
Go for it.
So, can we call it Metroid Prime Echoes of Aether? Just because, like, if we're going back to Aether, but it's a slightly different version of Aether, that would be like an interesting way to
I
word
can
that.
dig it.
I
dig
would
that.
hate to be anyone working in distribution having to deal with both Metroid Prime 2 Echoes and Metroid Prime Echoes Return or whatever. I'd be like, oh my god, please, no more. Maybe Metroid Prime Echoes Return. Return of
No.
Echoes.
What's the difference?
I don't know.
See, my thought was, since this was, you know, technically kind of in the Federation Force realm, go with like Federation Force Downfall, since you know nobody's making it out of this.
There already was Metroid Force, Federation Force Downfall. It was Federation Force. That was it. It already came out.
Yeah, I know, but see, if you officially title it that way, you can get your extra jab at the first one.
I think it would be an easy way to be set up on the internet to get memed. If you call your game Federation Force Downfall, you're almost setting yourself up for failure.
You know what they should call this game? Metroid Prime 2 Echoes 2, subtitle Federation Force 2.
Fall
I
of
love
Reach.
it. Perfect.
Fall of Aether. There we go. Metroid Prime Fall of Aether. Boom.
Oh
Book it.
no, I like
Ooh.
that one the best. Yes.
There you
Right,
go.
Metroid Prime 2. Let's do it.
I'm down. 2.2.
Metroid
2 by
Prime
2.
2 Redux.
2 by
2.
2.
Yeah, yeah.
So, all right. Well, I want to thank everybody for coming and hanging out. Thank you, Andy and Dakota, for taking time out of your schedule to come fraternize with the enemy. But that said, anybody listening to this should definitely be listening to Omega Metroid as well, because if we're your thing, they're definitely your thing too. So, but with all that said, we'll close it out here. Want to say thank you again. We'll see you guys next week. Everybody have a great night. Peace.
See ya.
Bye.
See ya.